Along the busiest street in all of Whitby lies the only store in town where average citizens, whether they're in work uniform, business suit, school attire, or pajamas, can feel like a superhero for a day. With 2,200 square feet of space, secluded from an oversized Petro-Canada and a small plaza, owners and longtime best friends Steve Quinnell and Nick Katros transformed a rundown coffee time into an everyman comic book and gaming store called Comic Book Addiction, appealing to all types of people of all ages with its visual layout, wide selection of items, and customer care. Since opening their first store in the plaza next door on March 4, 2006, they are celebrating the store's 5-year anniversary with their nomination for the Harry Kremer Award for Outstanding Comic Book Retailer, the Grammys in the comic book world. While a name like Comic Book Addiction suggests a headquarters for comic book addicts, the store's tantalizing motto, "Come in once and you'll be hooked," invites the public to discover what hides behind the brick wall. "We don't want to be just a Whitby store. We want to be a store that everybody will come to," says Quinnell. With that in mind, the owners paid special attention to the appearance of the store, something they believe other comic store owners pay little attention to. Quite often, they're not very well organized. Dirty, dark, says Quinnell. "I think what makes our store stand out is that it's a retail store that sells comics and games. It's not really a comic book store." The original art sketches and popular comic figures displayed throughout the store turned it into a mini art museum, with the border of the entire first Amazing Spider-Man comic from 1963 running along the walls being the center of attraction. On an average day, the store resembles a library with customers quietly browsing through shelves of alphabetized comic books. The sounds of pages flipping and shoes shuffling rhythmically blend with Benny and Jets on the quiet radio. A father looks at store manager and comics directory Phil Scott for comic book recommendations for his 2 young children. While Scott takes the father around the store to suggest several possibilities, the son and daughter mark the glass display cases with their tiny fingerprints, pointing to each comic figure they can identify. When the employees are not giving recommendations or checking out items, they are socializing with customers about comics, film adaptations, and even the weather. They get to know you. "You're not just a customer," says Kyle Quinlan, a CBA member. "There's a real sense of community at that store." On CBA's busiest day of the week, dubbed New Comic Book Day Wednesdays, customers line up along the glass display cases that surround the single cash register, eager to get their hands on the newest comic. An overjoyed teenager impatiently rips the tape from the plastic seal, opening the comic book to release the familiar smell of ink and glued paper. Weekends are just as busy as Wednesdays, with events hosted in the corner of the store, bordered off by a long shelf of comics. On a Saturday afternoon, the store reeks of acts as over a dozen males socialize before a card game tournament. As soon as Quinnell says go, they all fall silent, adopting the role of wizards in the multiverse, handpicking their most powerful cards of spells and creatures to duel for supremacy. On Sundays, the testosterone battle arena is converted into a children's daycare. The silence of Saturdays is replaced by the shouts and laughter of children. Laura Bentley, the event coordinator at CBA, supervises the children as they swap Pokemon cards, glue their hands to their handheld game consoles, or test their brains on the weekly games. But Bentley isn't the only adult around. Oftentimes, there are young people playing with others old enough to be their parents or grandparents. The age group is crazy because we have one man that's about 45 or 50 years old, and the youngest girl I have is 4. And they play together, said Bentley. Though males dominate the comic book scene, girlfriends, wives, and mothers surprisingly find interest in many of CBA's store items. "I thought comics were for the geeky type," says Nadisha Mitchell, a girlfriend to one of the customers at CBA. "It wasn't until I walked in and looked around that I realized how so many popular movies and shows that we all know and love is actually based on comics. Even the geeky types are rare to find in the store." "Our main customer here is what I like to think of as a high-end business comic guy," says Bentley. "They're mostly doctors, teachers, lawyers, a few construction workers. They're not the comic book guy from The Simpsons. The owners themselves are average Joes." Katros is a full-time lawyer for Kobo Books who occasionally stops by the store. And Quinnell, who balances his time between the store and the comic book warehouse, worked in landscaping and snow plowing before running a comics business full-time. "People don't think a comic book is literature when really it is. They're just pictures added to the writing," says Caitlin Mitchell, one of the few female customers at CBA. In its 5 years running, Comic Book Addiction has become more than a comic book store. It is a library, a museum, a daycare, but most importantly, it remains a headquarters for new and longtime comic book lovers. As Steve Quinnell and Nick Katros demonstrate through their wide range of clientele, people don't have to be a particular age or sex to read comics. People don't have to act like superheroes to love comics. And people don't have to know anything about comics to enter a comic book store. As long as there is a spark of passion and a place for the passionate, the rest is in the ink.